Steve Bannon is an awful, racist guy, but he is no fool. I'd encourage you all to read Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green to get the full picture. He really is the chief architect behind President Donald Trump's candidacy and his presidency, how he came to be the president, the entire alt-right movement in general, and the false but effective alignment of a certain part of the right with populism. Part of that alignment was getting the base riled up over trade in this country, and there actually is a lot to get riled up about. According to Lori Wallach of the nonpartisan Berggren Institute, NAFTA's outcome includes a staggering $181 billion U.S. trade deficit with NAFTA partners Mexico and Canada, and the related loss of 1 million net U.S. jobs under NAFTA, growing income inequality, displacement of more than 1 million Mexican campesino farmers, and a doubling of desperate immigration from Mexico, and more than $360 million paid to corporations after investor state tribunal attacks on and rollbacks of domestic public interest policies. That's one long sentence. The data also shows how post-NAFTA trade and investment trends have contributed to middle-class pay cuts, which in turn contributed to growing income inequality. NAFTA contributed to downward pressure on U.S. wages and growing income inequality. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2 out of every 3 displaced manufacturing workers who were rehired in 2012 experienced wage reductions, most of more than 20%. And instead of looking at that overwhelming data and seeing it not only as a policy failure, but as a political liability, many Democrats, including chiefly President Obama, decided to embrace a new trade deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. Hillary Clinton was initially for it, but then came out against it when Bernie was hammering her on her, and it eventually died in Congress, the TPP. But Donald Trump came out swinging against not only the TPP, but NAFTA itself.
Your husband signed NAFTA, which was one of the worst things that ever happened to the manufacturing industry.
That is your opinion.
You go to New England, you go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, you go anywhere you want, Secretary Clinton, and you will see devastation where manufacturing is down 30, 40, sometimes 50%. NAFTA is the worst trade deal maybe ever signed anywhere, but certainly ever signed in this country. And now you want to approve Trans-Pacific Partnership. You were totally in favor of it. Then you heard what I was saying, how bad it is, and you said, I can't win that debate. But you know that if you did win, you would approve that, and that will be almost as bad as NAFTA. Nothing will ever top NAFTA.
That was strong, and I happen to think it was one of the chief reasons that he won in states like Michigan and Wisconsin. Those states were the most decimated by these trade deals. And that opposition to huge multilateral trade deals was Steve Bannon's influence, which is what sets Donald Trump and Bannon apart from other Republicans who adored the TPP, and despite it being quite unpopular in America these days, are continuing to push Trump to restart the TPP talks, which he honestly might do, especially now that Bannon is gone. He lied about everything else in his campaign. Why wouldn't he lie about this too? And what about Steve Bannon? Why am I even talking about him? He was fired from Breitbart. He's irrelevant, but not really. In addition to thinking he's a large part of why Trump won, he also made some interesting comments the other day about Trump's trade positions, and I do think that he's right. If Mr. Trump stands firm on $150 billion worth of tariffs he has threatened to impose on China, Mr. Bannon said he will fulfill the promise of his nationalist presidential campaign. If he retreats because of either a hemorrhaging stock market or a rebellious Republican Party, he will demonstrate that the Trump movement was not much of a movement after all. This is going to be a bumpy ride, Mr. Bannon said in an interview Monday. I don't think he'll back off because of a couple of bad days in the stock market, and I do think he'll have a couple of bad days. But Mr. Bannon said he's worried about the lack of support for Mr. Trump's moves within the Republican establishment and about pressure from major party donors like Sheldon G. Adelson, the Las Vegas casino magnate who has huge investments in the Chinese territory of Macau. The donor class and the politicians, from Paul Ryan to Mitch McConnell, have thrown in completely with the "we don't want a trade war" crowd, he said. My fear is, what does the money want to do? Mr. Bannon blamed the news media and Wall Street for fanning fears of a trade war, even as he conceded that the tariffs would drive up the price of some consumer goods in the United States and that China's retaliation against soybean imports could hurt American farmers. The American consumer is going to pay 3% more for their products at Walmart, he said, adding, everything is about the American consumer, but what about the American worker? Look, I mostly agree. I don't think that the childish, simplistic way that Trump is going about these tariffs, rubbing them in China's face, will be effective or is the way to go, but this is how corporate money in our elections has warped the discussion in America. It is all about the consumer, because you know why? The consumer is consuming corporate America's products. The workers are the one taking the profits from the bigwigs because of, like their labor and such. But Bannon is absolutely right with that comment. And if you read Devil's Bargain, you will see that Bannon became pretty quickly disillusioned with Wall Street after he was working at Goldman Sachs for a while in the 80s. And I really think that you can see that disillusionment in the way that he expresses his political beliefs, in the way that he directed Donald Trump's campaign, in the way that he can read the tea leaves in America. But here's another thing that he is right about. If Trump goes down this corporatist road, there's no turning back for him and the Republican Party. Even if these tariffs aren't effective and are counterproductive and childish, I actually think that they're good politics. The mantra on getting tough on China worked for him in 2016, and I think it could continue to work for him unless he approves another version of the TPP. There have been varying reports, but many outlets have been saying that Trump will re-enter the new and revised TPP that has gone into effect with 11 other nations, including, but not limited to, Australia, Canada, Japan, Mexico, and Vietnam. If he does, well, I'll say what Bannon won't say because he's still trying to suck up to Trump in public, but if he does, he and the Republicans better be very worried about 2020. The false populism of bringing jobs back that they push forward and being anti-multilateral trade deals is what got Trump into office. Now that Bannon is gone, the people advising him on policy like this are people like Steve Mnuchin, the foreclosure king. If I were betting, I'd put my money down on Trump moving towards a more corporatist position on trade, and that is very bad news for him in 2018 and 2020 and the entire Republican Party.